You pay thousands of euros in taxes each year, and I do too. Thanks to our taxes, this country can keep on running. But have you ever asked yourself, where does all that money actually go? And who decides how to spend it? What if I told you that billions of euros are wasted every single year on projects that make absolutely no sense at all? That's exactly what this book, the Schwarzbuch from the German Taxpayers Association, exposes. I read this entire book, laughed and cried a little at the same time, and I will show you the 10 most shocking ways the German government burns through your taxes. And it all starts with the Hermann-Hesse Railway in Baden-Württemberg, a small line meant to reconnect Calw and Walderstadt. The plan in the early 2000s was simple: reopen the old track by 2018. But until today, no train is running. Why? Bats. Around 1,000 protected bats live in 2 tunnels along the route. And instead of relocating them, engineers built a tunnel inside the tunnel, complete with lights and ultrasound, to guide the animals. What began as a 49 million euro project has now exploded to 207 million, and it's still not finished. Just like the Beethoven Hall in Bonn, a historic concert venue named after the city's most famous son. It was supposed to be restored in just 3 years, ready for Beethoven's 250th birthday in 2020, but 9 years later, there's still no music playing. What began as a 43 million euro project has now soared to more than 221 million. And because of those skyrocketing costs, renting the main hall now costs more than 20,000 euros a day, 4 times more than before. The city fears, rightfully so, that the high rent will drive away organizers and leave the hall empty, costing taxpayers an additional operating deficit of 2 to 3 million euros each year. Let's talk about 2 projects in Hamburg. The new opera house is being planned in the Hafen City, promoted as a generous gift from billionaire Klaus Michael Kühne. He wants to fund the construction through his foundation and then hand the finished building to the city. Sounds great, right? But the so-called Kühne Opera is turning into an expensive deal for taxpayers. The city still has to cover land preparation, flood protection, infrastructure, and keep the old opera running until 2034. Altogether, public costs add up to more than 311 million euros. And I don't know about you, but is it really a gift if Kühne gets a say and even a veto in the design process? It feels more like buying influence than generosity, doesn't it? And Hamburg is not just wasting your tax money on an opera, but also on what's supposed to be Germany's most modern youth prison in Billwerder. The project was planned to cost 165 million euros with a guaranteed maximum price. But somehow that guarantee didn't mean much. The costs have already climbed to 192 million euros, and because the prison is built under a rent instead of own model, higher construction costs mean higher rent. The annual rent jumped from 8.6 to 11.7 million euros, which works out to be more than 42 euros per square meter every month. In total, taxpayers could end up paying over 430 million euros for this so-called maximum price project. Seeing all these projects, it's easy to get frustrated because we can't really stop the government from wasting our money. But what we can do is make sure that you're not overpaying your own taxes. At PerFinEx, we help people saving taxes so they keep more of what they earn. And if you want to learn how much you could save, book a free meeting with us right here. From one prison to another. The new correctional facility in Zwickau-Marienthal was planned to cost 150 million euros back in 2014. But more than 10 years later, the prison is still unfinished. The site turned out to be contaminated, and after years of planning errors and failed tenders, construction completely stopped in 2024. By now, over 230 million euros have already been spent on a half-built prison. Now the earliest opening date is 2030, and the total price tag has exploded to 476 million euros plus another 24 million set aside for so-called risk reserves. Let's move into the top 5 with Hamburg. Again, seriously, what's going up there in the north? The German Port Museum was supposed to be a national landmark celebrating maritime trade. The project started back in 2015 with an opening planned for 2025. But 10 years later, not a single brick has been laid. The foundation behind it still hasn't delivered a proper plan or cost estimate, and the chosen site sits right next to chemical plants using hazardous materials like chlorine gas. The original budget was 185 million euros, but new estimates put the total cost at nearly 500 million. And almost 40 million have been spent already for a museum that doesn't even exist yet. Number 4 takes us to Augsburg, now home of Germany's most expensive theater renovation. The State Theater has been closed since 2016 due to fire safety issues and outdated technology that was partly from the 1930s. It's been dark already for 9 years and will stay closed for at least another 6. With reopening not expected before 2031. The project has been plagued by poor planning, endless delays, and even a planning office that had to be replaced after faulty work. Redesigns to preserve historic remains pushed costs even higher. What started at 186 million euros has now climbed to over 417 million, and experts warn it could exceed 600 million before the curtains finally rise again. Number 3 is the insolvency of the Swedish company Northvolt. How can your tax money be lost if a private Swedish company goes bankrupt, you might ask? Great question. Northvolt was supposed to build a massive battery factory in northern Germany, a flagship project to make Europe less dependent on China. But now the company is bankrupt, leaving behind billions in debt and an unfinished factory near Heide in Schleswig-Holstein. The state-owned KfW Bank invested 600 million euros through a convertible bond that's now gone, and another 420 million are at risk from an older German loan. Altogether, up to 1 billion euros of taxpayer money could vanish, and the government had planned to give Northvolt another 700 million in subsidies. Good thing they didn't. And you wanna hear the ultimate irony? The remains of Northvolt might now be sold to a Chinese investor, the very dependency this project was meant to end. We've already heard a lot about operas today, but Stuttgart is taking things to the next level with its own Opera 21. Just like the infamous Stuttgart 21 train station, this renovation has turned into a €1 billion tax sinkhole. The historic state opera, built in 1912, urgently needs renovation. Its stage machinery dates back to the 1980s, and working conditions for 1,400 employees are considered unacceptable. The project was first budgeted at 960 million euros in 2019, but constant delays, supply shortages, and rising construction prices have pushed this figure to around 2 billion euros. And critics even warn it could reach 3 billion by the time it's done. And the timeline is just as dramatic. The first performance in the renovated opera house isn't expected before 2043, nearly 30 years after planning first began. And finally, number 1. The government's mask purchases during the pandemic, one of the biggest cases of waste in modern German history. In early 2021, the health ministry promised every supplier a fixed price of €4.50 per FFP2 mask. The result? A buying frenzy. Germany ended up ordering nearly 6 billion masks, less than a third were ever used, and more than half had to be destroyed after they expired. Storing and managing this mountain of unused masks has already cost another €500 million, and more than 100 lawsuits from suppliers could add hundreds of millions more. In total, this pandemic panic shopping cost taxpayers well over 7 billion euros. Altogether, these 10 projects have wasted nearly 14 billion euros of taxpayers' money. That sounds like a lot, and it is, but it's only about 3% of Germany's 2025 federal budget. which totals more than 500 billion euro. So if you'd like to see a video on what the German government is really spending your taxes on, drop a comment below. And since you can't stop the government from wasting money, at least you can make sure you're not wasting your own. And watch our video on the top tax deductions for expats next. Thank you for watching this video und bis zum nächsten Mal.